AskReddit by Super Ashley. Do bosses like Michael Scott actually exist? And if you work Ed for one, what's your craziest story? I had a boss sneak up behind a middle-aged female employee and pick her up, then immediately drop her down saying I didn't think you weighed that much. He could not stop laughing. He was the principal. This occurred during passing period in a crowded middle school hallway. I had a boss once who spent all morning locked in his office. He asked me to come in after lunch where he showed me a handmade graph. He then proceeded to explain that this was a chart of all the sex he had ever had in his life. See, here it is blank until I joined the army. Then I went to a hooker here. Then they sent me to Vietnam where hookers only charge $2 per time. That's where you see the big jump. I was on 2 tours but then got shot in the face. I came back home and you see how it just drops to almost nothing. I was astounded. What the fuck, LMAO? He wanted a pomegranate for lunch and they were out of season, but that didn't stop him from sending me on a quest to every grocery store in town in search of a pomegranate. Multiple produce guys laughed at me, but that was the easiest $13 per hour I've ever made. Edit. Wow, this blew up. Rather than replying to each of you, I'll say it here. No, I did not find a pomegranate, and when I came back he was eating Subway and he seemed to have forgot he'd even sent me. Maybe I could have gone home or to the movies etc, but IDK. Driving around leisurely listening to the radio seemed like a pretty good alternative to doing my actual work at the time. I did in fact check the gas station in Carbondale. They also do not carry pomegranates unless they are in season. Shoulder just called around and went to lunch, then come back hours later saying you had driven to those locations to check. I had a redhead boss who made us all sit down and watch a training video about how we shouldn't refer to him as a ginger because it is bullying. No one had ever called him that. Pam, that's not a hate crime, Michael. Michael, well, I hated it. Had a boss who was very peculiar. For instance, he'd open a random closet, look at the stuff inside, then go on a tirade. Look at all this. Who bought all this crap? Exclamation point up. You did. Oh. Well, somebody needs to throw it away. Constant stuff like this. This sounds like my mother. I had a boss that used to watch me through a gap in the glass partition between our desks. She wanted to see if I was paying attention during meetings. One day, I put a large folder to cover the gap and she freaked. I still laugh when I think about it. This sounds way more like Dwight but still hilarious. Never have worked for one myself, but my dad told me a story about his boss who was giving out awards to everyone in honor of how long they've worked there, and he would give speeches for each person. A woman employee received her award and he gave a speech about the story of how she came to work there. And he said, "At first I didn't want to hire her because she was so hot. My dad's not working there anymore, but I love that story because I will never not picture Michael Scott giving Pam a Dundee and saying that about her." And X200B. Edit. For all those asking, I am Big Tuna's distant cousin, enlarged tuna fish. I condone. No. I encourage every one of the girls to show more cleavage. Like, Pam. What is that you're wearing, Pam? You look like a nun. My ass boss insisted his daughters be flower girls in my wedding. I declined. At the reception, he told me I was spending too much time talking to one person, and I need to work the room more. Question mark? Was he referring to your new spouse? He held a meeting with our whole team less one person to discuss said person being gay. We all knew for well over a year, and never made a deal of it. So yes, they are out there and that is why the show is so funny to me. I can relate. Did he try to kiss him? I literally had a boss who would stop us in the middle of our work and hold company-wide meetings talking about 9/11 truther conspiracies and chemtrails. Mind you, we were furniture making company. He would get so caught up in his conspiracy theories that he forgot to order wood to make furniture 1 month. Was his initials DH? Chicago? Yep, I had one. Organized a thoroughly awkward award ceremony once, that we never did again. Asked a Mexican employee if his new baby's name was going to be No Mas during the shower we threw for him. Heard me once use the phrase economy of scale, then used it wrong 5 minutes later in a conversation with different people. Didn't know the meaning behind Black Friday and what it meant for a company to be in the black. Just like Michael Scott, only more of a dick. Deleted. Long ago, my 80-year-old boss pulled me into his office. B. Paul, I've noticed that your shirts come untucked and that looks unprofessional. Me, I'm sorry about that, Joel. B. I want you to start tucking your shirts into your underwear. Me, up. B. Go ahead and try it now. Me, Joel, you know I have 15 women who report to me I can't undo my pants in the office. B. Sure you can. Drops pants. He is 80 and wearing Spider-Man underoos. This is also the story of how I went to work at Oak instead. He clearly just wanted to show off his Spider-Man underoos. I worked for a woman as her personal assistant cat sitter. She was super rich and off the deep end nuts. She had me order a mannequin online, and then paid me to take one of the mannequin legs to Nordstrom to try and see what suitcase I could buy that would fit the dismembered mannequin body, because she wanted to fly with the mannequin to Pittsburgh to display as her daughter, dressed in her daughter's clothes, at that daughter's graduation celebration. Buying the mannequin was a whole thing too. She kept trying to get me to order from adult doll websites because she didn't get it till Mayo. Wow, this is less Michael Scott and more clinically insane. I want to hear more. My boss used to carry around a backpack full of hammers, and if you fell asleep at your desk he started banging a hammer on your desk until you woke up, and then he would autograph the hammer and give it to you as a gift. To be fair to your boss, is falling asleep at work common? We had an anonymous feedback program at work, and our boss was livid with the results, particularly with several comments that he frequently lost his temper in meetings and would yell at us. The more he talked about how incorrect and unfair and hurtful these comments were, the redder and angrier he got, until he finally pounded the table and shouted, "I do not scream in meetings. Okay? Guess what? I have flaws. What are they? Oh, I don't know. I sing in the shower. Sometimes I spend too much time volunteering. Occasionally I'll hit somebody with my car. So sue me." No, don't sue me. That is the opposite of the point that I'm trying to make. My mom's boss was the head manager at an office job in suburbia, pretty similar number of employees and function to the office in the show. He was in his late 40s at the time and invited himself to my mom's birthday party at our house one year. Basically was just my siblings and a few family friends meeting up to play cornhole and chat for a couple hours. He showed up in pastel blue shorts, a pink polo, and flip-flops with a case of natural light. He got hammered by like 9 PM and started yelling at everyone. He saw a couple of our neighbors, younger guys, drinking next door and took the liberty to invite them over. Eventually he ended up in a wrestling match with one of the neighbors in the living room, which he finished by lifting the neighbor up in the air and body slamming him directly onto our coffee table. His final act of the evening was shitting his pants in the kitchen and... Sounds like he's trying to relive college. Yes. They are everywhere. I've had a few. One would only approve your days off if you played into her ego. Her boring ass stories had to be the most fascinating thing you had ever heard. She would come into the office and spin around in a new outfit and we had to pretend it was amazing. I had to work every weekend for months until I started playing along. Deleted. Yeah, and I worked for a church and he was the senior pastor. He had no filter and his own morality. which was questionable to everyone else. He'd say things to the secretary like, "I don't think you and your husband should be together in the upcoming pictorial directory photos since you guys are probably gonna get a divorce." She was fighting hard for her marriage. If he didn't get his way during a meeting, he'd go straight to the classic grandma Christian phrases like, "What's God gonna say when we get to heaven and we didn't let the charismatic church use our building for services?" They were known to do fake faith healings and things of that nature. He'd also put his hands on every young girl's shoulders and flirt with every granny. He himself was mid-40s. He got fired for cheating on his wife. I have a few examples, but I'm tired and English is not my first language, so here are the most relevant ones. He's a dentist. Once, he bought a mini basketball net which he installed in the staff room. He was so excited about it that he pretended that the tooth of his next patient miraculously repaired by itself, so he sent her home and had an hour free to play alone in between the table and our bags. He hired a company who would manage his staff to develop strategies to make more money, basically, but every time they would come over, he would spend the entire meeting interrupting them and saying how good he was the worst, and how he knew better than these guys. He didn't. Still, as an exercise for that management company, everybody in the team had to take a test telling us about our personality, leader, sociable, intellectual, etc. He was so upset that my results were his ideal that he took the test over and over, changing his answers, until his leader category was high enough as our boss. I worked there for years. I have plenty of stories. I used to call him Michael Scott. Seriously, it was the same. Deleted. I love the bird thing, assuming it didn't get to captive audience. Nothing better than someone with a genuine passion. Nothing worse than being trapped in a conversation you don't want to be in though. Mine was less entertaining than Michael, but we often compared him for the following examples. Only hired people he would have a beer with. Grossly underqualified to manage, but he was good at sales so got promoted. Made really awkward, distasteful jokes comments. For example, asked an employee if he and his twin brother shared a girlfriend. Just really wasteful, pointless meetings. Nobody knew how he spent his days. His assistant manager did all the heavy lifting and he would wander around making conversations. Literally showed up to a meeting with his superiors having done zero preparation and they kicked him out of the meeting. He actually got fired for calling COVID and flew to a Chinese employee back in March. I think that would have to be the craziest. He had worked there for 8 years but had so many notes on his file. This was just the one that pushed it over the edge. Man, I wish I could remember more, but I've blocked most of it out. 1. Told us he invented Apple computers before Steve Jobs. That the computer he invented is still to this day more powerful than any other computer. 2. Threw knives in the air and said if you can catch them he'll give you money. This was apparently at a Christmas party. I wasn't there but believe it 100%. 3. Came to work wearing nothing but leopard print underwear and a pink cowboy hat. He's like 70 dart. Unfortunately I was there for that one. 4. He was diagnosed with bipolar disorder but not the bad kind, the kind that makes you super smart. 5. Got drunk at work and gave alcohol to whoever would take it. He literally needs to be institutionalized, but he's rich so he gets away with everything and everyone is scared of him. Yes. He'd never admit it though. He swears he's a gym. Edited to at, do I need to be liked? Absolutely not. I like to be liked. I enjoy being liked. I have to be liked. But it's not like a compulsive need to be liked. Like my need to be praised. Pretty sure this is the mantra my boss lives by. In true Michael Scott fashion. My boss is like Michael Scott in the bad ways. She thinks she's friends with everyone. She thinks she's really cool, but is super lame. She constantly distracts you from your work. She calls frequent meetings with no purpose or direction. Meetings are a corporate requirement sometimes. Back at the dance studio, my boss would literally ask us what the meeting should be about when we got to the chairs. I believe every manager in the world has had a Michael Scott David Brent moment. That is what makes it so hard to watch at times. I have had nights where I have often wondering how many I have had and how badly was I viewed as a result. And X200B. My worst I think is telling someone they got a job in a warehouse and then realizing I had told the wrong person and having to tell him 30 minutes later that he didn't have a job after all. Dreadful. Dude, I am literally scanning this thread expecting to find one of my former employees talking about me. In real life it's not funny. I had a boss like that in my retail job. He was annoying, constantly making bad jokes, and then he ramped it up when he decided he wanted to get me to quit. For the most part I just ignored him, until he started a rumor I was hooking up with an underage coworker. Then I confronted him, and he backed off. Eventually he got fired for sexual harassment. Deleted. I had a grumpy boss, mid-40s, newborn baby, got passed up on a promotion. He would walk around saying snakes are gonna get ya, snakes are gonna get ya. Swallow 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 ya lunch. And my favorite. True hero. What did any of those mean though? Can't wait to read all the best comments on BuzzFeed tomorrow. Deleted. Boss, I just found a rotten banana in my bag, probably been there a while. Quiet coworker, is that why there are all these fruit flies in our windowless office? Boss, no. Deleted. I've never watched The Office, but I had one former boss who was a bit odd. He was department head for a group of adults ranging from mid-20s to mid-60s, and in staff meetings he said on a number of occasions that he needed to go potty. He'd occasionally not bother doing things like managing or coordinating and instead would take on some of the tech jobs, like preparing new laptops for staff or other stuff which more often than not had to be redone from scratch because he fucks something up. Occasionally on Fridays he would come to work dressed in these very puffy white long sleeve shirts as if he'd just walked off the set of Pirates of Penzance and accessorized this with a puka shell necklace. https://images-images-i_41UE3dbf1z.art_score.jpg I'm thinking of that Seinfeld episode about the pirate shirt. I used to work for a cybersecurity startup, now a huge public company. The office director that initially interviewed me for the role turned me down because he felt a woman couldn't do this job. This was for a sales job. I was eventually approached by a different manager for the role, and, against my better judgment, took the job. As the only woman in the office, the director that initially interviewed me, shockingly, continued to be a huge, sexist pose. He constantly made comments about my lack of or too much of makeup, my clothes, my weight, my voice being too deep or too high, really anything that had to do with being feminine. At one point, I had a serious illness that spanned several months and I lost over 20 pounds. While I've never been fat, his first comment to me after I spent the previous night in the ER was, "Changmini, you've lost so much weight. Now if only we could do something about how pale you always are. Have you tried blush?" He was so surprised that his office had more HR complaints than every other office in the company combined. I used to work stocking shelves at a grocery store. Thanksgiving was coming up and we were slammed. We were getting a massive shipment in, almost twice as many pallets as we normally get. After we unload the truck, we're all scrambling to get things done so we can leave on time. Well, our manager calls an emergency meeting. We all get into the back office and he proceeded to have a 45-minute meeting about this is a big shipment and we can't waste time. I thought it was a weird joke, but he thought he was giving us a pep rally. I filed a complaint about my manager with corporate over very unsafe, mentally and physically, work conditions. My boss responded by holding a meeting and telling us she could slit our throats and not feel bad about it. The worst job experiences ever, and it wasn't even a big deal job. I was a fucking maid. I am the Mitchell Scott of my job. I cannot believe they made me a manager. All the dumb shit he does. I'm like, yup, there I am. False. Too much self-awareness. You are the Stanley. I had a boss once offer me $50 if I came in to cover a shift for him. Instead of paying me cash, he gave me a comic he claimed was worth $50. It wasn't. Deleted. They certainly do. That's why the show's so funny. Had a general manager give a line that sounded exactly like it came out of the mouth of Michael. He wanted to say be there or be square. He started the phrase wrong, but his brain knew it was a rhyme. So he said be here or be queer. Not in a funny way, but I did have a boss who completely lacked self-awareness. He once told me I wasn't allowed to make certain statements until I had a PhD. Laughed while he said this too. Told me I was stupid for not subletting my very full apartment for 3 months when I was whisked away on a spontaneous work project. Told me I spent too much time eating and sleeping. Insisted I apply for a PhD at Texas A&M and refused to accept that I wanted a degree out of the country. I got accepted into a position and he kept sending me new openings telling me to drop the one I had accepted and do this instead. There's a lot of industry specific shit he said too, but I'll leave you with these. I eventually filed a harassment complaint against him. Mine was not the first complaint, but it will be the last. He was banned from getting new employees and barred from working in 2 countries. Long story. 2012. Working the top-end apartment market in Melbourne, Australia. The boss is in his 70s and seriously old school. Like didn't believe in social media marketing, old school. The IT guy changed our data storage from an old box in the office we work to a cloud. Boss didn't want a cloud server because the wind and thunderstorms might mess it up. Deadly serious. I would have said something during the meeting, but the look on it guy's face was too good to disturb.